Start recording. And a very good morning to you all out there in Sydney, all around the world, wherever you're listening from. Welcome to Play On Podcast. It is the 17th of March in Sydney, overcast day, but beautiful temperatures, sitting around 25. And I'll tell you what, this morning I've got someone very special in the studio. Put your hands together for Colesy, who's here from Chats with Colesy.
Hey, thank you, Albert. I appreciate that. It's good to be on here. Thanks for inviting me. I look forward to the good chat.
Mate, a lot to talk about. There's a lot to talk about. A lot happening in the world at the moment. There's, war in Iran. Donald Trump's got the prices at the Bowsers going up. Australians are screaming everywhere around the world. They're screaming if you're filling up a car, trying to get those groceries in. But
Cost of living crisis.
Cost of living. So welcome again. Once again, thanks for coming in, Colesy, this morning. Let's have a talk about some of the things that are going on in Australia. And a big thing that I want to talk about this morning and start off with, I guess, is immigration. Immigration. Now, if you have a look at me, you can see that I am Samoan.
Yes.
Born in Samoa. I am myself am an immigrant.
Yes. What
is it about the immigration in Australia, and how do you think it's changed? I mean, what's changed between the 70s? Looking back at when the Greeks and the Italians and, all these came over, things were different to now.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I was speaking to you earlier, you came in 85. So, yeah, that was definitely a different era that you're talking about. And I see the Australian flag behind you, and, you know that you're an Aussie, just like me, and you're proud of your Samoan heritage, just like we're proud of ours. But, Australia's a long way from everywhere. And back in those days, I think that was a big difference. You get these immigrants now who they have one foot in the country and one foot out of the country more than ever. So, and that's technology, I think. Yeah. Because we've all got their phones. So they come here and they're talking to their family at home, wherever they come from. They still refer to it as home. Yeah. And they're sending money back and they're going on holidays to home. Because back in the day, it wasn't so easy to travel back to Europe or even Samoa or anywhere like that. It was very expensive. But now the world's so interconnected that people aren't forced to assimilate, like naturally are forced to assimilate as they were. And so that, I think, is an underrated part of the problem of assimilation today, is that technology and government, and no one seemed to recognise that, is that people are still living on their phone, and the communities here are so big that they can live within their community, speak their own languages, have their own cultures, religions, and then be sending money back as well as travelling back, and it's always to home. Whereas back in your day, when you came here and pre-2000, really, when people came here, that was it. They burned their bridges to a large extent in the fact that they couldn't really go back. It would take too long, too expensive to fly, go back on a ship or whatever it is. Yep. So that's a massive technological change. And so people aren't assimilating to the Australian culture as it was naturally done in previous times.
I put my hands on that. That's excellent. Look, there's something to be said about the type of immigration, right? And if you have a look at some communities are sort of overrepresented with, certain types of people, nationalities. And I'm probably going to get shot for pointing this one out, but having a look at the stats. So let's have a look at the Indian community. So there's a lot of Indians and there's billions of Indians in India. Yes. And so how much of that should Australia take? Like, why should we take?
Yeah, it seems like the government has done some kind of deal in the last 15 years. Back when you came and when I grew up, there wasn't Indians here, really. Maybe the odd one, but in the last 15 years, I've noticed since 2000, I think it was about 2007, 2008, there was an influx. Obviously, there's been some deal between the Australian government and the Indian government, and that is really pushing the limits of Australian society fabric in the sense that now there is more Indians than Aboriginals. I mean, wrap your head around that.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's actually more Muslims than Aboriginals in Australia.
Well, that's another thing I want to get onto in a minute. Is talking about the Muslims. So with the Indian communities here, and they're coming over here. Look, they own a lot of real estate. They own a lot of businesses.
They're very business-minded.
And
we've seen that in other countries around the world. I know my kids are half Ugandan, and in the 70s, the Ugandans had enough of the Indians in that country, and it ended in bloodshed and sent them out. And I know in other countries around the world, it's a pattern. And so we're not being racist against Indians, but they're very business minded. They like to get into government and control and things like that, and they're very productive and everything. But it has historically caused real problems in countries around the world that we know of. This is a pattern. So we could pretty much say this will happen again because it's happening, and it's not individual problems, but the government is putting their head in the sand, ignoring history, ignoring facts of this, and when these minority groups get too big, the majority feels uncomfortable, but also the minority who, up until when minorities is small, everyone's happy. Everyone treats, they're not threatened, they're nice to each other, they're things. But when they get big and they're infiltrating the culture, the government, the councils and things, then they start to look at each other and go, oh, we're both feeling a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for that. And talking about infiltration of culture and changing the culture, let's talk about Islam and the rise of Islam in the West and how that's affected many Western nations. Let's look at France, let's look at the UK and how the changing landscape there, where they're coming into a country that's got common law and they want to bring Sharia law. Why do they come into these countries that have given them freedom, give their children freedom, give them their rights to all these things that we enjoy as Westerners, the prosperity of Western civilization and the Judeo-Christian law, and yet they want to bring Sharia law?
It's hard to. That is a hard question to answer, because on the face of it, other than the fact that in long term they're thinking of invasion, because they are willing to come and enjoy the fruits of it, but if they so hold on to their ideology, their religion, and want to bring their own law opposed to the law, as you say, the common law of the country, then that is invasion by sheer numbers. So when there's not that too many of them, they're obviously not able to institute these, but it's a weight of numbers. Again, like the Indians, against like the Muslim, the individuals aren't a problem, but when there's too many, they're not going to go against their own religion or their own ideology. So there's it's a weight of numbers that gets to the point where there's enough of them who believe strongly in their ideology or religion, or extremists or what have you. Then they form groups and radicalize others and bring others into their Sharia law, and they're able to set up their system just through sheer weight of numbers. I think that's what it is, just the numbers of them, and then the current ones aren't going to say no to them because it's part of their beliefs. Well, they were happy to assimilate, but when you get a certain threshold, tipping point, then, and I think that's the concern, and the governments have really buried their heads in the sand, that there's a tipping point where they're going to be more loyal to their ideology and religions if there's enough support around.
Absolutely. Look, Charlie Kirk once said that immigration without assimilation is invasion. And that's... So looking around communities like Auburn, they try to, at Lakemba, they try to get the approval for a call to prayer. Right, it got knocked back by the council. Even in this area, Camden, they tried to build a mosque out here many years ago, back in the early 2000s, and they'd been applying it, it got rejected. I've been out west to some communities, I think out at Wellington, and where I noticed that the Islamic community, the Muslim community, they don't really assimilate with the other Australians. They build themselves up in these small little, patches, and they grow.
Enclaves.
And
I'm in Leppington, 20 minutes from here, and near me in Edmondson Park, there's a big mosque, and even just 2 minutes down the road, there's another big mosque, and then there's 3 big Muslim schools in my area. And so if I think about that, there's probably more Muslim schools than there are state schools or Christian schools, and there's these 2 really big mosques. So I don't think people outside of Sydney, and people don't generally visit Western Sydney when they come to Sydney, they visit the Opera House and the bridge and things, and there's no real need to travel out here. So I don't think a lot of Australia really grasps what is going on out here in Western Sydney. As you say, there's those areas which are very dominated, becoming more and more dominated. They are not assimilating. What are they teaching in their schools? What are they teaching in their mosques? As we talk about, when there's more and more people with the same ideology and it gets harder and more extreme, and they're less likely to assimilate and more likely to bring in Sharia law and the underage marriages and the genital mutilation.
That's what it is. Female circumcision is genital mutilation.
And pretty much in their society, women are worth half of a man. So basically, they've got no rights.
No, that's right. And they say that they're the equivalent of cattle.
And so that what a terrible. That's certainly not compatible with our culture that respects women and has had, the women's rights and the women's voting and we respect women and everything like that. So these things, but when they come in more and more, they'll be subjugating the community around them.
So just getting back to this immigration thing with the Islamic community.
Yeah, so it's in England. I think the guy who's in charge of education in England now, he came out and said he's going to have to crack down on the arts in the schools over there in terms of dance and different things because it's offending Muslims. And so this is where they bring their way into the community. They're riding the back of the gender fluidity, the LGBT, all of the rights and things for minority groups, and now they're riding on that, saying, "Oh, these things are offending Muslims," and so obviously they want to have their halal meat and their this and that and everything's and the woke. Once one party saying we're offended, well, if the Muslims are offended, we have to. But nothing about the Christian or the local custom is protectable. That's the aggressor and to be attacked. So that's how they're getting in.
So they want a caliphate. They really want a caliphate. Really, they want to take over.
Yeah,
take over the West.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's that's how they've shown they've moved through the countries, even in the Middle East. Even Iran wasn't a Muslim country. They weren't Christian. I think they had their own religion. But the point is, they through sheer weight of numbers, and then they take over through this, as you said, invasion, which is immigration without assimilation. I think they've done that with country after country. Even Egypt, I don't think that was a Muslim country. So just through weight of numbers, they take over to have their caliphate as the dominant thing, and they would love to do that all over the world. You see many people of their imams online who are saying the same thing about America. They want to come in and take over America eventually. I think they're all deluded. I don't think it will happen. But we can't be stupid about the extremes of that religion.
Yeah, and the fact that a lot of these things getting funded, the Australian government funds a lot of these places, is just absolutely mind-blowing. How the taxpayer is funding these schools and some of these institutions that are openly preaching against us.
Astonishing, isn't it?
Absolutely astonishing. Absolutely astonishing. Mate, just quickly, let's talk about One Nation and the rise of One Nation. That's something that I'm very happy about. Let's put your hands together for Pauline Hanson and One Nation. I'll tell you what, back in the 90s and that, you wouldn't think in the early 2000s, you wouldn't think One Nation would get to where they are now, but I think the political climate and the people of Australia who have always relied on, say, Labor or Liberal, the mains, have had enough. And people see what's going on in the country and they've had enough, and they said, that's it, Pauline Hanson, One Nation represents, and she speaks what a lot of Australians think. And when I say Australian, I don't mean white Australians. I mean Australians like myself.
Yes.
Who came here, and we're looking for a better quality of life. We came here to get away from the sort of stuff that they're trying to change the country into.
Yeah. Yeah, we want to preserve what we know, what we grew up with, and what we enjoyed, and we want to preserve and protect that. And I think you're right. When we grew up, you're either Labor or Liberal, and politics wasn't really a big part of our lives. But it almost seemed like 2025 there was a big awakening in Australia, and we had the March for Australia and those sort of things. And I think it was because we shut the gates over COVID, but then after COVID, the floodgates just opened. So there's been millions of people who've arrived, and we were already, very multicultural, but all of a sudden, I think everyone's noticed with the price of rents in the inner city and the number of Uber drivers and the number of people who are struggling to speak English. It's just really affected our way of life too much, and just the sheer numbers. And we've gone, oh, hang on, we've looked at Labor and we've looked at Liberal, and we've realised they've probably been good in their day in certain times, but over the last few years, we can't see a significant difference between their policies. One will do things a little bit less, the other does it a little bit more, but it's not seriously. They're both selling out to to the globalist
Yep.
community in terms of economy and in terms of social makeup, like, oh, we can just have people from anywhere and we'll just make up some new culture of nothingness where everyone has their own culture.
Absolute nothingness.
Then we'll
Yep.
sell out all our resources for free because we love all the other countries as well while they're taking advantage of us. Whereas we've realised that our country is falling, and now we're just witnessing what Pauline Hanson has been talking about for
Absolutely.
20 years. So
Absolutely.
it really wasn't in our face so much back then. But maybe in hindsight it was happening slowly. But after COVID, with the influx of, they were trying to catch up from the COVID time, but they've really put it in our face that the immigration has gone too far, and we can quickly lose. I think people like me, we extrapolate and say, well, hang on, we want to protect and preserve at least what we've got today. If we keep this going, it's only going to be another 10, 15 years when Australia's going to be totally different to even what it is today because
Completely
of the
different.
birth rates,
Yep.
immigration, that combination. Wow, it's incredible.
Incredible. Let's have a quick talk about climate change and the hoax, which I believe it is. I believe climate change is a hoax. There's a lot of new research coming out showing that the polar ice caps haven't melted. The whole of the ozone layer hasn't killed us.
Right.
Carbon, the carbon levels and what have you. So, looking back at people like Al Gore and all these people that were pushing all these agendas back then, and then they're asking developed nations like Australia and the US to, foot the bill for all the green stuff. I mean, what about other polluting countries like India? They've got billions. China, they've got billions.
The hypocrisy.
The hypocrisy of this whole bloody thing,
And people who weren't born yesterday, like me and you, and we started hearing things even when we were in school, like the hole in the ozone layer or this or that. And so we've seen these trends come and go for years and years, and we're threatened that we've been hearing about the icebergs melting forever and the beaches rising and the islands getting covered and things like that. But what you start to realise is with Al Gore and Greta Thunberg and things like that, this is economies and Bill Gates where they're literally creating problems from science that you can produce on reports and in paper so that they can try and solve them and seem like heroes. Obviously, they're economically sorted, right? So they're very wealthy people who don't have the problems of the day-to-day people putting food on the table, paying for their rent.
Yep.
All of that's sorted. So they've got to have a purpose in life. And if they're not religious as such, they've got to come up with a way with how they're going to save the world in some way. I really believe that because it's just shown year after year that it's just not true, and the science is conflicting, and yet the government use it to control the people's behaviour and squash the economy and try and turn us into a socialist dystopian garbage place, which is going backwards.
Excellent. Right. Just before I let you go, mate, I'm going to talk about the current energy crisis, what's going on with this war in Iran and the fact that fuel prices are going up. What's your take on this whole thing? So the latest I see is that Donald Trump is asking allies to help him patrol the Hormuz Strait that Iran has been...
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's interesting.
He's asking for help. I wonder why the USA doesn't do that themselves. Like, they've obviously got the infrastructure to take over the place. It is interesting. I suppose maybe it's because the oil from there doesn't go to America, so they're not affected. They've got their own oil, whereas the other countries need the oil. So you guys better help out if you want to do it.
But hang on, he should have asked us. Before he went and started bombing Iran, and now we're there. Oh, Uncle Donald. Wow.
Yeah, but I think there's a few people that are at fault. Obviously, the war is inconvenient for our economy, but it's also it shows up that Australian government has sold our own infrastructure and resources up the creek, and we're too reliant on other people. So it's shone a light on that. But also, I find a lot of people who blame Trump or the USA for certain invasions over the year, they tend to forget the tyrant or the evil or the threat, the risk that the country possess. So Iran, for instance, they fund Hezbollah, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, Houthis, everything. So while Iran themselves haven't been directly attacking Australia, US, Israel, all these other countries, they really have been through their little armies, which just go by different names, so which are puppets. So I'm supportive of a regime getting knocked out that is causing all these terrorism acts around the world and is acting at such the root of the evil. But there's going to be a cost to pay in that, isn't it? Such a sensitive area of the world where a lot of the oil comes from, and unfortunately we're going to pay the cost economically. But you can't get progress without a bit of cost in some ways, and it's more up to our government to manage the oil resources and protect our own country and start to put Australia first.
Excellent.
Pauline will.
Well, I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, it certainly has been a blast talking to Colsey from Chats with Colsey on the show this morning. I want to put your hands together again. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Albert.
And I'll tell you what, we'll get together sometime again, mate, and hopefully we'll do some more interviews, mate. Good on you, mate. Good on you.